On a chilling January evening in 2023, a serene Northumberland town was shattered by an act so brutal it sent shockwaves across the nation. Holly Newton, a bright and vibrant 15-year-old, left her home like any other day, not knowing she was stepping into a nightmare orchestrated by someone she had once trusted with her heart. By the time the sun set, her young life would be taken in an alleyway, a place now forever haunted by echoes of her final moments. The bustling streets of Hexham, filled with after-school chatter and the aroma of fresh pizza, seemed safe, ordinary even. Holly stood outside a local pizza shop, waiting with friends, completely unaware of the shadow that had been following her. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend, Logan MacPhail, had traveled 40 miles from his home with a single purpose. Armed with a kitchen knife, he watched her from a distance, his jealousy and rage festering into a deadly resolve. As Holly waited outside, a normal teenage moment turned sinister. Logan, just 16 at the time, approached her calmly, asking for a private conversation. What Holly didn't realize was that she had already become the target of his twisted obsession. In a split second, her life would spiral into unimaginable horror. Lured into a nearby alleyway, Holly was brutally attacked, stabbed 36 times in a frenzied outburst of violence that left her no chance to escape. The screams that pierced the air that evening were both desperate and haunting. A teenage boy, witnessing the attack, rushed to Holly's aid, only to be stabbed himself as he tried to intervene. The once vibrant schoolgirl, known for her warm personality and close friendships, lay motionless, a crime scene that would devastate an entire community. Police officers and paramedics arrived at the scene, met with an unimaginable sight. Holly was rushed to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, where doctors fought to save her life. Tragically, their efforts were in vain. By the time her mother, Michaela Trussler, reached the hospital, Holly had already passed away, leaving her family to grapple with a loss that defied comprehension. What made this crime all the more harrowing was the sheer premeditation behind it. Logan had meticulously planned his actions, traveling from Gateshead to Hexham after leaving school early that day. He had spent hours stalking Holly, lingering outside her home the night before and following her for nearly 45 minutes before launching his attack. His obsession and resentment over their recent breakup culminated in an act of violence so horrifying that it continues to echo in the lives of all who knew Holly. As the small town of Hexham mourned the loss of one of its own, a haunting question lingered. How could a teenage relationship spiral into such unimaginable tragedy? The case of Holly Newton was not just a story of love turned fatal. It was a devastating reminder of how controlling behavior and unchecked rage can lead to irreversible consequences. And for Holly's grieving family, friends, and community, life would never be the same again. Before we proceed, kindly remember to subscribe to our channel if you are an advocate of healthy relationships. This helps us bring you more cases like this. Holly Newton was a young woman with an extraordinary capacity for life, love, and laughter. Born and raised in Hexham, Northumberland, she was the epitome of a bright and promising teenager. Holly's family, especially her mother, Michaela Trussler, saw her as a beacon of joy and potential. Michaela often described Holly as someone who brought light into every room she entered. She had a heart of gold, and her mother's eyes would glisten with pride whenever she spoke about her daughter. Holly was the kind of girl who, even at her young age, left a lasting impression on everyone she met. From an early age, Holly had shown a deep love for life and was passionate about her friendships and family. Her social circle in Hexham was tight-knit, made up of people who adored her infectious spirit. At school, Holly was well-liked by both her peers and teachers. She was a thoughtful student with an enthusiasm for learning, a quality that set her apart from many of her classmates. Holly's best friend Beth shared a touching memory about her. She was always the first to offer a hand to help, whether it was with homework or just to brighten your day. But beyond her sunny exterior, Holly was not without her struggles. Like many teenagers, she was navigating the complexities of growing up, dealing with the challenges of adolescence and the emotional turbulence that came with relationships. One such relationship that would shape Holly's story was with Logan MacPhail, a boy she met through mutual friends. They began dating when Holly was about 14, and for a while, things seemed typical for a young couple. However, the relationship was marred by red flags that Holly, in her youth, might not have fully understood. Logan exhibited signs of possessiveness early on, particularly when Holly began gaining attention from other boys. This possessiveness would soon evolve into jealousy, and their once flourishing relationship began to take a dark turn. Holly eventually realized that she was in a toxic relationship, one that left her feeling suffocated and emotionally drained. She made the difficult decision to break up with Logan, hoping to regain control of her own life and future. While Holly had hoped the breakup would provide her with the peace she longed for, Logan's obsession only deepened. Holly's friends noticed that she began to withdraw from social activities as Logan's behavior became more erratic. She began to receive persistent text messages from him, angry and often unsettling in their tone. Holly would confide in her friends, telling them that Logan had been showing up at her house and following her around town. Despite these alarming behaviors, Holly remained hopeful that the situation would pass, never fully grasping the danger she was in. Logan, only 16 at the time of the crime, had struggled with issues of control and obsession. It was clear that he had not been able to cope with the end of the relationship. In the days leading up to the tragic event, Logan began to exhibit increasingly erratic behavior. He would show up outside Holly's house, stalking her from a distance, sending her alarming messages, and making her feel unsafe. Despite Holly's attempts to ignore him, Logan's fixation deepened. It was in this volatile and emotionally charged context that Holly's life was tragically taken. The tragedy unfolded on the evening of January 25, 2023, when MacPhail, despite their relationship ending months earlier, meticulously planned to meet Holly. He had been showing obsessive and controlling behavior toward her. On that evening, MacPhail, who had traveled from Gateshead to Hexham, followed Holly and her friends for some time. Holly, who had just walked out of a pizza shop, was approached by MacPhail, whose face was covered. Within minutes, he led her into an alleyway, where he brutally stabbed Holly 36 times with a kitchen knife. Her friend attempted to intervene but was also stabbed in the process. Holly's murder shocked the community, and MacPhail was arrested shortly afterward. MacPhail's arrest was followed by a trial, where he initially denied murder but admitted manslaughter, claiming a blackout during the attack. However, evidence suggested he had carefully planned the murder, driven by jealousy and an inability to accept their breakup. The investigation into Holly Newton's tragic death took a significant turn as law enforcement worked to piece together the shocking details of the brutal attack. As police interviewed witnesses and examined the crime scene, the mystery surrounding Holly's murder began to intensify. The initial narrative of a troubled breakup slowly shifted into a more terrifying, calculated sequence of events. It was clear that MacPhail had been fixated on Holly, unable to accept the end of their relationship. However, it was not until police reviewed crucial evidence that the full extent of his obsessive tendencies became clear. One of the most crucial pieces of evidence came from surveillance footage that showed MacPhail following Holly and her friends for nearly an hour before the attack. The CCTV footage revealed how he had stalked her, ensuring he was out of sight, carefully planning his approach. The footage not only documented his movements but also his demeanor, giving investigators a chilling insight into his state of mind. In addition to this, MacPhail's alibi quickly unraveled. Early on, he tried to explain his movements that day by claiming he had been too tired after attending school in Gateshead, but the journey he took to Hexham, where the murder occurred, spoke volumes. Instead of going home, he had taken a bus to a shopping center and then traveled another 40 miles to Hexham. He had no legitimate reason for this sudden trip, and when questioned, seemed to show little remorse for his actions. While these details began to add pressure on MacPhail, it was the discovery of his body cam footage that provided a breakthrough. In the hours following his arrest, MacPhail was filmed by police officers as they questioned him. What stood out was his apparent confession. His comments were chilling. "She was being too horrible to me. I meant to kill myself, but it went too far." These words, spoken just after he had been detained, would later be used against him in court, showing how the act of violence escalated beyond what he had initially intended. During this footage, MacPhail also identified Holly by name, indicating that he knew the gravity of his actions. The confession itself didn't provide the full motive, but it solidified his involvement. and gave investigators a deeper understanding of the rage he had felt toward Holly after their breakup. However, the investigation was not without its complications. While MacPhail's confession was a crucial piece of evidence, there were still many unanswered questions. Early on, police suspected that there might have been a history of domestic abuse in the relationship, particularly due to Holly's mother's concerns. Michaela Trussler, Holly's mother, had reported MacPhail's behavior, saying he had been stalking Holly and repeatedly harassing her. Witnesses had claimed that Holly appeared frightened when MacPhail approached her outside the pizza shop in Hexham. Her refusal to engage with him initially seemed to indicate that she feared him, something that had been previously noted by her friends. Yet when Holly agreed to speak with him in the alleyway, no one could have predicted that MacPhail would attack so viciously. It left many wondering whether there were other contributing factors, such as mental health issues or manipulative tactics, that led him to carry out such a violent act. Throughout the investigation, false leads and contradictory statements from witnesses only heightened the difficulty for the police. Some witnesses claimed to have heard Holly's screams from the alleyway but did not immediately realize the severity of the situation. The teenage boy who tried to intervene was stabbed, and it was only after he fled to the pizza shop for help that others in the area rushed to stop the attack. The real turning point came when MacPhail's detailed confession, combined with the mounting evidence, painted a clear picture of premeditated violence. Holly's mother's statements during the trial would later shed light on the emotional toll the crime had on her family. Michaela Trussler described how she had tried to seek help before the murder, arranging a meeting with the police to discuss MacPhail's behavior, yet Holly was tragically killed just hours before the meeting was set to occur. This phase of the investigation marked a shift from uncertainty to clarity, but it still left lingering questions about why MacPhail had acted out so violently, and whether there had been any further warning signs that might have stopped the tragedy before it happened. As the investigation continued to unfold, the growing body of evidence and MacPhail's chilling confession led authorities closer to understanding the true nature of the crime. Yet, even as answers began to emerge, the haunting question remained. How could a seemingly innocent teenage relationship spiral into such a devastating and brutal act? It was clear that Holly Newton's death was not just the result of a breakup, but rather the culmination of months of obsessive behavior and a violent outburst fueled by jealousy, anger, and rejection. The breaking point in Holly Newton's tragic case came when investigators had gathered enough evidence to confront Logan MacPhail, the teenage ex-boyfriend. As shocking as it may have seemed, the pieces of evidence, ranging from security footage to witness statements and even MacPhail's own statements, began to align, confirming what the authorities had suspected all along. Holly's murder was not a random act of violence, but a premeditated act of obsession, fueled by jealousy and rejection. MacPhail, initially denying any involvement, was confronted with overwhelming evidence during his arrest. One of the most pivotal moments came when he was questioned by police about his whereabouts during the murder. Initially, he attempted to cover his tracks, claiming he had been tired after school, but the mounting evidence told a very different story. Surveillance footage from several locations, including the bus route he had taken to Hexham, placed him in the area before the crime. His alibi collapsed as investigators presented undeniable footage, including clips of him stalking Holly earlier in the day. The tension was palpable as MacPhail's demeanor shifted from arrogance to defensiveness. When asked about his connection to the crime, MacPhail grew agitated, his previously composed exterior cracking. It became clear to investigators that MacPhail had meticulously planned the murder, carefully selecting the location and time to confront his ex-girlfriend. The DNA evidence found at the scene, including traces of blood on his clothing and shoes, further corroborated the arrest. The final puzzle pieces were falling into place, leaving MacPhail with little room to deny his role in Holly's death. As police released details about the investigation, the public's horror deepened, but there was also a sense of relief. The arrest of MacPhail provided some closure, though it would never fully heal the deep wounds left by Holly's murder. Holly's family was initially relieved to know the identity of the killer but struggled with the complexities of the case. The young, seemingly harmless boy who had once been in their daughter's life was now a murderer. They were left grappling with questions about what went wrong, how their daughter had ended up in such a dangerous relationship, and whether the authorities could have done more to intervene before it was too late. When Logan MacPhail's case finally reached trial, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Holly Newton's family, friends, and the local community were all in attendance, eager for justice and answers. Holly's mother, Mikala Trussler, was especially determined to see the man who had stolen her daughter's life brought to justice. As the trial began, all eyes were on the proceedings. The prosecution's case was straightforward, yet emotionally charged. They presented a mountain of evidence, including DNA from the crime scene, surveillance footage that showed MacPhail stalking Holly, and his own statements from the police interview. The prosecution painted a chilling picture of a young man consumed by jealousy, unable to cope with rejection. His violent tendencies were emphasized through his obsession with Holly, culminating in the shocking murder. One of the most critical pieces of evidence was the body cam footage from MacPhail's arrest, in which he confessed to going too far during the attack. The footage was shown in court, and it was enough to send a wave of shock through the gallery. The emotional impact was undeniable, especially for Holly's family, who were forced to relive the horrors of that fateful night. While the evidence seemed overwhelmingly against MacPhail, his defense team attempted to paint a different picture. They argued that MacPhail had been under immense emotional stress and could not fully understand the consequences of his actions. They suggested that he was suffering from mental health issues, pointing to his prior history of emotional instability and the difficult breakup with Holly as factors that may have triggered his violent behavior. MacPhail's defense sought to mitigate his guilt by introducing testimony from psychologists who claimed he may have been dealing with undiagnosed mental health problems at the time of the murder. They suggested that the pressure he felt following the breakup with Holly led him to snap, arguing that he should be considered for a reduced sentence or a psychiatric evaluation rather than facing the harshest penalties. However, the jury wasn't swayed. As the case unfolded, the focus was squarely on the brutality of the crime, and the emotional toll on Holly's family was clear. Throughout the trial, they had to listen to the harrowing details of their daughter's final moments, details that no parent should ever have to endure. Perhaps the most emotionally charged moments of the trial were the victim impact statements, delivered by Holly's family and close friends. Mikala Trussler, Holly's mother, broke down in the courtroom as she described the hole left in her life by her daughter's death. Her words, full of grief and sorrow, painted a picture of a mother who would never be the same again. The courtroom was silent as she shared the pain of losing her daughter, and it was clear that the emotional weight of her words left a lasting impact on everyone present. Other members of Holly's family spoke as well, recounting memories of Holly's bright spirit and promising future. They spoke of the love they had for her and the devastation they felt at her untimely death. Each statement added to the emotional depth of the case, reinforcing the notion that Holly's life was more than just a statistic. It was a tragic loss for a family and a community. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated. The weight of the case hung heavily on their shoulders, as they had to decide whether Logan MacPhail should be held accountable for the cold-blooded murder of his ex-girlfriend. The evidence was clear, but the defense's arguments about his mental health made the decision complex. When the verdict was finally read, it was met with an outpouring of emotion from Holly's family. The jury found Logan MacPhail guilty of murder. As the judge read the sentence, the room was filled with mixed emotions: relief, sorrow, and anger. MacPhail was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 17 years. Holly's family, although relieved by the verdict, knew that no amount of justice could bring their daughter back. The sentence, while significant, could not undo the damage caused by MacPhail's actions. The murder of Holly Newton sent shockwaves through the small, close-knit community of Hexham, Northumberland. The brutal nature of the crime and the fact that it was carried out by someone she had once trusted left residents shaken and struggling to comprehend the violence that had unfolded on their doorstep. The case drew widespread media attention, highlighting not only the personal tragedy, but also the broader issues of domestic violence, mental health, and the lasting effects of toxic relationships. For Holly's family, the aftermath was an ongoing journey of grief and healing. Holly's mother, Mikala Trussler, became an outspoken advocate for victims of domestic violence, using her own painful experience to raise awareness about the dangers of abusive relationships and the importance of mental health support. While the verdict brought some measure of closure, the wounds left by her daughter's death would never fully heal. Throughout the trial, Mikala had leaned on her family and friends for support, but the emotional toll of Holly's death had changed her forever. She now found herself not only mourning her daughter's loss, but also channeling her grief into something greater, fighting for change. Mikala shared her heartache with the public in interviews, speaking about how Holly's life was tragically cut short, yet how her memory would continue to live on in the fight for justice and change. This advocacy work became a way for Mikala to keep her daughter's spirit alive, while also working to protect others from experiencing the same type of loss. For Logan MacPhail, the trial had sealed his fate. The stark reality of his actions left him facing years of confinement and reflection on the life he had destroyed, both his own and Holly's. Life in prison is never easy, and MacPhail was not exempt from the consequences of his crime. His time behind bars has been marked by isolation and occasional outbursts as he grapples with the weight of his actions. The justice system had delivered a verdict, but the personal consequences for MacPhail were only just beginning. This case forces us to reflect on the darker side of relationships, especially those that are marked by manipulation, possessiveness, and emotional abuse. Holly's mother, Mikala Trussler, expressed how her daughter's death was not only the loss of a life, but the loss of a family's heart. Holly's light was extinguished far too soon, leaving a void that can never be filled. As Logan MacPhail faces his future behind bars, Holly's family and friends are left to grieve, to remember, and to question. How could something so senseless have occurred? How could a teenage relationship spiral into such fatal violence? We end this chapter of her story, but the memory of Holly Newton continues to haunt and inspire. Let her death not be in vain. May it serve as a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing the signs of control in relationships, of supporting those who may be struggling in silence, and of protecting the innocence and future of every young person. If you support Holly and you strongly advocate for healthy relationships, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share this touching story wide and far. Thank you for watching and for allowing Holly's story to be heard. Stay tuned for more stories, and remember, justice is not just about punishment, but about understanding the deep, lasting impact these tragedies have on our communities.